Well, Shervin, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's funny because I met you through one of those creator dinners. Then I saw you again, and I was like, "Wow, this dude is really going for it." And I appreciated you being there so often. You know, it showed a level of commitment to the craft. But why don't we start and take it back to October 23rd, 2016?
Uh-oh.
What was that date? Why was that date significant to you?
October 23rd, 2016.
Yeah.
Why was that date significant to me?
It's when you posted your first YouTube video.
Oh man, wow. I was like, you did some research and remember something that I don't. Wow, yeah. I know 2016 was a very big year for me. I was a software engineer and I quit my job June 2016. And I gave myself a year to figure out life. I had that luxury. Not a lot of people do. It's a privilege. And I started watching. I literally feel like I'm going down memory lane right now. I would say I've always had the dream of building a business. That's been like my lifelong goal. I think, smiling and laughing is really good for you. And they provided that at that time. And Yes Theory was just, I think they were probably one of my favorite, and they are to this day probably one of my favorite creators, is just seeking discomfort and putting yourself outside your comfort zone, because when you grow, you just become a better person. And I think that desire to seek your full potential, that's kind of what drifted me towards them.
And you met Yes Theory, right?
Yes. So in their early days, I think they're around like 400,000 or 200,000 subscribers. They did a retreat, and it was building homes in Nicaragua. And I had just quit my job. I didn't really have much money. And I remember the trip was like $2,200 with no flights included. And I was like, I have to go on this trip. It doesn't make sense logically, but my heart was set, and I went. And Amar was the team that I was on, and we built a house together with like 4 other people and made great friendships. And it just felt so good to like build something with your own hands, and to provide something for the family that we built the home for. And yeah, it was crazy.
I think part of your story, which I found really fascinating when I was digging into it, was how you're so willing to follow joy and your curiosity, and whatever, we'll get into a bunch of it, but whether it's yoga or wearables or NFTs, like you're willing to be the person who takes the risk to follow the curiosity because your own heart is on fire because it's interesting to you. Yeah. What made you that way?
That's a great question. I think it's just like an innate desire. Like there's this feeling inside, like there's an inner voice that's telling me this is what I want to do. And you can either shut that voice down or you can listen to it. And I think the biggest thing is I shut that voice down for a long time, for at least the first 22 years of my life. And then there was a point where once I went to college and I graduated, I was like, I need to listen to that voice. And that's when the flip switched. And I was like, all right, I need to go all in and listen to that voice. And it's a process. I'm still figuring that out.
What keeps that voice alive when it dims down?
I think it's like when I do those experiences or I chase after those curiosities, it reignites that same voice, and you feel that joy, that passion. And it's like when you have that feeling, that voice gets louder and louder, and it's like, this is good, keep doing it. Yeah.
One of those situations was when you became a yoga teacher, and you didn't intend to become a yoga teacher, but you did yoga one time, you enjoyed it. You did it again. You were like, oh, wow, I like this. Oh, I could be a teacher. Oh, and slowly but surely, just from following your own curiosity and listening to that voice, it stayed alive and you found a new thing you were interested in. So take me to being a yoga teacher and how that journey developed.
Yeah, this oddly goes back to Steve Jobs. So listening to his speech about how you can't connect the dots looking forwards, but you can connect the dots looking backwards. Yeah. Just follow your heart and everything else will fall into place. And I wanted to kind of trust that philosophy. And that's when I was like, all right, let me just follow what interests me, what sparks my curiosity. And that brought me into practicing yoga, because I think at the time it was trending and it was cool. And I was like, they say that yoga is good for you and I want something that's good for me. So I started practicing it, and that kind of led to meeting people and creating a friend group and environment that was conducive to beginning to teach yoga. And I took a training and a program, and that led to leading yoga classes. And I did that for a couple of years, and it just became a part of my life because I just kind of listened to what I was curious about and what kind of provided that positive feedback loop.
And what would you say to somebody who wants to get into yoga but isn't right now? Like, how does somebody get into yoga?
Show up to a class. I think the best, like, it's really hard to do things on your own. And if you feel more comfortable doing it on your own, there's great content on YouTube. It's all free. Just watch and practice in your own room. But for me, the easiest thing was having that kind of external factor and pressure of like showing up to a space, having a time, and doing it with a friend. Invite someone to go with you and do that with a friend, have that experience, and show up to a physical studio. And if you don't have that, online. Yeah.
And what do you learn from being a yoga teacher?
That movement is really important. Breath is really important. And just having a consistent habit, like being able to move and breathe, and knowing that like your behavior can change how you feel, is because I can go into a yoga class and move and breathe and then walk out of that feeling totally different than I started. So anytime I didn't feel good or something was going on that day, it was a great like reset button.
And the first thing I noticed about you was that you're jacked out of your mind, right? Like you can't really tell from this shirt, but when we were at the dinner, I'm like, oh my God, this dude's biceps are out of control. But it was just like wild to look at. And but what I find interesting about that is that you were into lifting and you were willing to do yoga too. Like for me, when I was first starting lifting weights, I wouldn't have gone to a yoga studio. Did you have any judgment about different forms of exercise, or how did your lifting journey start? And then take us through the judgment aspect if you had any.
Yeah, I think the first thing about making your biceps look bigger is just about wearing a shirt that's too small. But so that's very interesting. My lifting journey started when I could not go to the gym. I've always had the innate desire to want to be a large human being. It's really weird. When I was young, I wanted to go to the gym, and I remember going to the gym near my parents' house, and I think I couldn't even drive at the time. And they're like, you're too young. Like, we can't allow you to go. And as soon as I got my permit, and then I think you had to be 16, then I was able to drive and they would allow me into the gym. I started lifting. And I think it was just like this humane desire, like this inner desire to want to be a larger person.
Where do you think that comes from?
Childhood stuff, maybe. I don't really know. I felt maybe it's like, I think there's a lot of things in life. I felt like, I think when I was growing up, like wanting to be accepted, wanting to kind of like look cool. And I think the one thing that you can't really change your face or what you look like, but you can change how you look physically sometimes. And I felt like that potentially was part of the desire. And then also just like feeling self-confident in myself. I think that was also a part driver, because, when I go and I look at myself in the mirror after a workout, it's like, I look at myself, I'm like, wow, I'm proud of what the work I put in. And that like reassures me that like I'm capable of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I find that lifting actually does change your face in some way. I don't know if that's just anecdotal evidence but maybe it's from the neck. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It could be just, how much weight you're carrying or water. I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Yeah. So talk to me about the journey into wearables and technology. You've done videos on Aura, the Aura Ring, shout out Aura, Whoop. You're not wearing it. Oh, that's Whoop?
That's Whoop, yes.
Wow. So you got it all. Like you're a machine of wearable technology.
Yeah.
What got you so into it? Like what made you so fascinated with wearables?
I think it all came down, I've always loved technology. Like when I was growing up, I remember asking my dad for the newest camcorder, asking for the newest computer, just because I love tech and gadgets and things like that. So that was part of it. And then the second part was like, I was a competitive swimmer growing up, and then the yoga and the lifting, all that kind of stacked up as well. And then those two interests kind of merged. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like there's wearables that can measure your health. And I was like, I love health and I love tech. And as soon as I learned about these things, I wanted to try them out. And that started the journey of like, oh, there's this. And then there's more things out there. And I started to keep buying all of them. And For some reason, I still wear every single one to this day. But I think it was this drive and want to just be healthier and be more productive and be more optimal as a human. And I just started to buy these things to see if they could help.
And what do you think, what surprised you the most about the Aura or the Whoop?
That if you can experiment in the right doses, you can actually change how you feel. Like really getting data on, for example, I take magnesium before I go to bed, you know, and trying different brands, like some worked and some didn't, but being able to see that data of if I take this brand of magnesium, I can see a noticeable difference in how I slept on my, you know, data for my Oura ring.
What brand is the optimal brand for you?
It's called MagTech.
MagTech.
Yeah, that was the one that worked for me, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone, right? It's all about experimenting with what works for you.
And do you have any other sleep concoctions or sleep remedies? I think it's one area people are always trying to get better at.
Yeah, I think the best ones are free. It's like no alcohol is huge. You can take magnesium and try all these other things that help improve your sleep, but if you're drinking alcohol, like it just negates everything times 10. So not drinking alcohol at least 3 hours before bed. And then consistent sleep schedule I found works for me. Watching the sun right when I wake up, just go outside and get like 10 to 20 minutes of sun exposure is really good. And watching the sunset I've noticed works. Staying hydrated, but not too hydrated. And
what does that mean? Like what's the optimal hydration for you?
I try not to drink like liquids like an hour before bed, because then it wakes me up and then I have to use the restroom.
Yeah,
so that's kind of the main thing. Taking different electrolytes without any additives or sugar or anything like that. And cooling my bedroom area. That's been huge. I run extremely hot. So having a cool environment, whether it's using an air conditioner or some kind of smart device that cools your mattress, is a big win for me.
Yeah. What's good with 8 Sleep?
They're my favorite product. That's what I've always run hot. So it's a mattress cover and it cools your mattress. And for me, that's like huge. Like I will lay in my bed and just having that cold sensation on my body, it just feels so good. And then I fall asleep much faster.
What is it? Like $3,000? It's like a crazy, like, is it worth it?
Go watch my review. It depends, right?
Yeah.
I think you can cool your environment with an air conditioning unit. If you have that, do that. It's really depending on like, do you have that exposable income and are you willing to invest in your sleep and is it worth it to you at that scale? And for me, like it was. And I've had multiple. I think I've been using it for 2 to 3 years now. And I think it's worth it because one, I run hot. Like if you don't run hot, then you don't really need it. But I've noticed that I just like feel better when I can fall asleep faster when I lay in my bed because it like cools me down.
Another thing that you love doing, speaking of hot and cold, is the sauna, the ice baths,
Yes.
the plunges. When do you get into all that stuff?
I'm obsessed.
Are you? How often do you do it?
So it's funny. I picked my apartment based on a gym that has all those things. So I can go downstairs and use it pretty much daily.
A man after my own heart.
I would say at least 4 to 5 times a week. Yeah. I'm a big sauna fan. Like if I'm not feeling a workout, I'll go sit in the sauna. Like I think if we had saunas everywhere, it would change the world. Because, you know, a lot of people can't work out, right? They might have an injury or, you know, just building that habit of going to the gym and working out might not be conducive to their physical body at that time. But a sauna, you're literally sitting. Like we all sit. You can go into a sauna, you can sit, as long as you don't have like certain heart conditions and things like that. But for the most part, most people can go in a sauna and sit and you're sweating, your heart rate's increasing. Like there is some benefits from just using a sauna. And if you can get people to start using a sauna to then hopefully start to work out, like that's huge.
Andrew Huberman was on the Modern Wisdom podcast and he mentioned that 57 minutes a week of sauna and 11 minutes of cold exposure is the optimal dosage or the minimum dosage to make impact. And I thought that was interesting.
Yes, that's awesome.
You're definitely over that, I would assume.
Yeah, I'm a little excessive. What I realized if I do too much sauna, I'll start to crave sugar. And I think that's because of my lack of like sodium and other electrolytes. So everything in moderation, just because something is like good for you. And if you do it excessively, it's not going to be that good for you. So
yeah.
Be mindful.
When do you get into it?
Into sauna and ice baths?
Yeah.
when I lived in Denver, I remember going to a workshop. Okay, this is actually the story all ties together. Yes theory. So I was watching a Yes Theory documentary about Wim Hof, and I saw them doing the cold plunge and ice bath, and I was like, I want to do that because of just watching that story. And I found someone who was running a local ice bath sauna workshop, and I went there and she did breath work, and then we did the ice bath a couple rounds plus the sauna, and I just felt like it's a drug. You feel so good after, this natural high throughout the entire day, and I felt amazing. And I was like, I want to keep doing this. So I kept doing it there, and then when I moved, and I came to New York, I was like, I need to find a place that offers that so I can consistently do it.
Yeah. Well, what I noticed about you is you're an early adopter in the best way. It's like you notice Yes Theory before they blew up, you're on that. You know, the next wave might be saunas and cold baths on every corner in Manhattan, right? Yeah. So it's like, I feel like there's a part of you that's very much early to things. And why are you early to things, do you think?
It's a natural tendency. I've always been an early adopter. Like the Oura Ring, like I remember the Kickstarter version where it's like a big chip on your finger. Like I wanted to get that one. It's just like, I think it's curiosity and this natural desire to want to just try new things. Yeah. I'm always looking for new things, and I've always been an early adopter, and it can be good and bad, right? You can try things that might be a detriment to your life and things that might be good, or it's a distraction as well, right? I'm always seeking out more dopamine and new objects. So shiny object syndrome.
What are examples of the early adopting mindset leading to negative outcomes? Like, is there anyone in particular that you're like, why did I waste my time on this or that?
It reminds me of like when people are trying to start a business or a YouTube channel, right? You see 2 to 3 people succeed and like 98 people do not.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with products. Yes, I'm wearing 2 products right now, but the amount of products I bought that I don't use, there's probably 98 sitting in my room in a bucket. Can we
list some of them? I'm curious. Which didn't make the Shervin cut?
I'm not going to say their names.
Well, you're allowed to not like a product. Yeah. We could cut it out.
There's a couple of products that like are supposed to help you reduce stress. So like there's one that goes around your ears and it vibrates and like you feel this light massage. There's one that goes like on your wrist or a brace or on your wrist or ankle and it vibrates slightly. I didn't feel a massive impact.
Gotcha.
I've bought like a light meter. Like there's an app on my phone that I can use a light meter for, so I don't use that. I have a GoPro.
Yeah. One of the things I found interesting also about you was you're very data driven in your approach, and meditation was one of the things that didn't pass the Shervin test. You were like, I don't see any improvement in my HRV or whatever you were measuring. And I thought that was interesting where you're like, everyone is saying this is a good thing, but it doesn't work for me.
You did your research.
Try.
Meditation did not work for me. And I try it from time to time. And for some reason, I just don't feel a drastic difference where it's like, if I keep doing this behavior consistently, it's going to change my life. And if it doesn't, like not everything's going to work for everybody. Yeah. And that's why I love the data approach. It's like, I'm going to try this. What happens to me? Do I subjectively feel different? Do I see a difference in the data? If it's a no and a no, why keep doing that behavior? Because we have limited time in the day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What if there's data out there that supports meditation that we can't access yet? For example, HRV was not something that most people could have actually tracked 10 years ago or 20 years ago. What if there's a similar metric that we can't track yet, but it actually helps?
And that's where the subjective piece comes in. It's like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
And there's meditation headbands and things that will measure your brain waves. And there's actually brain training devices that you can play a video game and it straps something to your head and it measures your brain waves and you're playing a game. And if you're focused, like your guy will jump up and down. If you're not focused, like he'll walk. So those things are slowly developing. And yeah, it could be that you're tracking to understand, like, does my beta or gamma or alpha brainwave change in the right way where I can be more focused throughout the day?
Because you're spending so much time with new technology, what's something that people don't do today, but you think in 5 years will be mainstream or be accepted or normal that currently isn't? We mentioned sauna and ice baths is one thing, but what else comes to mind?
That's a great question. I think the brain training piece is really interesting. I've used the at-home ones, and I've gone into a clinic where they actually put like a whole bunch of electrodes around my head. I think as that gets cheaper, there's a lot of potential there in terms of understanding how our brain waves work. And I think if you can just buy a device and be able to put it on your head and play a game on your phone at home, and if it improves your ability to focus, it improves your ability to do X, Y, Z, I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah. On the brain piece, it's like we have no idea what the measurable impact of social media is having on us. And I think, are you familiar with Balaji at all?
No, I'm
Balaji Srinivasan.
No.
He's had great podcasts with Tim Ferriss, and he's also somebody who lives in the future and is incredible. I'll put some of his episodes in the show notes below. But one thing that he talks about is like, how come when you look at a piece of content on social media, you don't know how that's impacting your physiology, right? Like you should be able to see your heart rate spiking, and it's not, the technology isn't there yet for that. But imagine if we could give people lower heart rate content to make them feel better.
Yeah.
What are we optimizing for today on social media? Likes and shares and all this stuff. But does that make you feel better as a human being?
Yeah. I bet Mark Zuckerberg is like, all right, how can we use people's heart rate to give them more ads?
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, measuring how you feel when you respond to a social media post. I think that'll be interesting. I think the thing is when you get that feedback loop, like for example, wearing a sleep tracker, when I get that feedback loop of if I do this behavior, then Y happens. Like if I drink alcohol, then my sleep score is bad, or I see my heart rate shoots up 10 beats per minute at night. Then I'm like less likely to do that behavior.
Yeah.
And I think if we can see that in other areas of our lives, whether it's like how we eat, what we consume, then people will slowly start to change their behavior. It's a double-edged sword though. People can get obsessed about the data and obsessive, which could be a whole nother thing, but yeah.
You were wearing a Levels, I think it was. What is that all about?
So that's a continuous glucose monitor. It's built for diabetics. It's a medical device. But more and more people are starting to use it for like health optimization reasons. And I think it's really fascinating. The goal is like, if you don't spike your glucose, you can have sustained energy throughout the day. And people are arguing for and against that. But I found it really interesting to see, hey, if I eat, like I was eating a meal prep service and I noticed that I would get really tired and then crave sugar after, and I want more coffee. And once I use that continuous glucose monitor or CGM, I would see a spike and then a crash.
Wow.
And because of that spike and crash, like my energy that was feeling the same thing. And I stopped eating that meal service, and I noticed that I just felt better and more sustained throughout the day.
How individual is all of that? Like if I eat the same meal prep, would I have the spike as well?
Yeah. So that's the thing. There's so many factors that go in. One is like, we both will respond to food differently. That's one aspect. And then two is like our lifestyle behavior. So how you slept last night, did you exercise this morning? Like that also has an impact on how much your glucose spikes or not. What did you eat? If you had more fiber, like that will even help. If you sit down after the meal or walk after your meal, like that also has a big impact.
What other changes did you make other than stopping that meal prep service from wearing the continuous glucose monitor?
A big thing I've noticed is eating out is really bad. Just restaurant food, fast food, because they just put so many things in there. And I've started to just eat whole foods, like just not eating anything that's processed as much as I can. And I've noticed I just feel so much better. Like Chipotle, for example, is like, you can consider that on the healthier end, but even when I would eat Chipotle, like I'd feel these crashes. And I've noticed that, if I just eat at home, like Greek yogurt and a little bit of fruit and like chia seeds, like I just feel much better throughout the day.
And is this something you wore for 30 days and stopped wearing? Is it something you're still wearing?
So the device lasts 14 days.
Gotcha.
Usually they'll do like monthly. I've done it for quite a bit of time, but I do it on and off. I'll do it like on for a month and then take a break and back on for a month. But I've been playing with it for like 2 years on and off. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, would you recommend something like this do you think everyone should try it? And
I think yes, if you're willing to commit to understanding how your food impacts your day. Because there have been times where I put it on and like there's a process, right? You got to scan the device and you have to like input your food. So that way you can see the correlation of the device to what you're eating. And there are times where I'm just like really stressed out in life and that's not my focus. I'm like, oh, I got to take a picture of my food. Sounds so privileged, but that's like part of the process of investing the time to input the data so you can see the correlation. And if you're willing to put in that work, I think there's value in understanding how your diet and your lifestyle behaviors impact your glucose levels and your energy throughout the day. But take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And tracking your food in general, is that something you've done from lifting weights and nutrition? Like what would you recommend for tracking food and how should someone get into that?
It's a great question. I am lazy. But
you're also jacked, so it's fine.
I would say part of it's consistency, hard work, and just like following some simple rules. Like for me, it's like, try to hit your protein intake, get enough calories ish. Like I'm not a hard rule follower, but like I've found if I just try to follow certain things, like I know I have the same meals I eat consistently. And it's like, I know if I eat most of this stuff today, I'll get there. And if I'm going to the gym every day for X time, I'll get there. So it's like creating these habits where I don't have to think about it, track it. Like I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not like trying to train for anything, but I do have like goals I want to hit. So it's just about consistency and being mostly on track. Was
there a point when you tracked for a little bit to just understand the data and then went on your merry way?
In terms of like macros? Yeah. I tried MyFitnessPal for a little bit.
Interesting.
But I never really was able to stick to it. But usually I just looked at the labels like, okay, like Greek yogurt, I have that every day. I know how much protein it has. I know put this much in a bowl and a little bit of fruit, like boom. Canned sardines, canned oysters, all of that, I know how much protein is in these things. So it's like, okay, if I eat these staple foods every day, I've hit like 80%. And as long as that like last 20% or whatever for dinner I get there, it's good enough. But I never actually like measured it.
Gotcha.
Other than that.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing you also did in your history, speaking of athletics, is you started a swim school.
Yeah.
You were a swim teacher. What gave you the idea to do that? And when did that cross your mind as something to do?
Yeah. It goes back to the business, the desire to build a business. I've always had that desire. And when I left my software job, I was like, what businesses can I build? What's my unique advantage? And I had a really close friend who was doing private swim lessons. And I was fortunate enough to live in a city where there's community pools in every single community. And he was like, I'll give you some clients. And I was like, great. So I started to teach. And then once you build that momentum, I would like to say like I'm very good at teaching and creating a positive environment to teach kids how to swim. And the parents notice. They're like, you're a really good teacher. So when a parent really likes you as a teacher, like kids cry, right, when they go in the water. So understanding how to make them feel comfortable and teaching them and making it fun, their parents really notice that. And like that is key. So they'll refer their friends, right? Moms like to talk to other moms, and that's slowly started to build. Like, I guess there was a Facebook moms group and people would ask like, who's a good swim instructor? And like my name would be one of the first ones. And I got to the point where there was just too many clients and I was like, okay, how can I hire people and teach them to do that?
Wow.
So that was the goal there. And I teamed up with another friend and we did that. It is kind of hard to teach the personality aspect and the making kids feel comfortable. We tried that for a little bit and it was just a lot of management. And I think making sure that they show up to the lesson and like paying them. And I was like, this is not really a scalable business because I came from the software world where you just turn on more servers and you can make more money. This was like, you needed a person and it was incremental growth. So I decided this is not something I want to do long-term.
Interesting. Yeah. And what do you think makes for a good teacher?
Positive environment, really empathizing with the student. Like it doesn't matter how old they are, but knowing how they operate and like what makes them tick, and making them feel comfortable and trust you. So that way you can take them through the experience of slightly pushing them and challenging them, right? Because your goal is to take them from point A to point B in terms of their learning skills. And it's like, how can I'll use swimming as an example. Let's say they don't know, they're too scared to be in the water. So how can I make them feel comfortable in the water? How can I make them feel comfortable putting their head underwater? How can I make them feel comfortable lying on their back in the water? And then it's like feeling comfortable moving their feet, moving their arms, and then swimming across the pool by themselves. So it's like taking them through those stages and understanding how they tick and how I can make them confident on each step. So that way they're like, oh, I can do this. And then it's like you build.
Have you applied that same framework to your own personal life of taking small steps and incrementally and then being like, oh, wow, I can swim now in a completely different area?
I would say 100%. Like anything you want to do in life, even when I was in software engineering, that was a big thing, like object-oriented programming. You have a big problem you want to solve, you break it down into small chunks and you do each one and then you connect them all together. So I think that ties into anything. If you're trying to change your habits in terms of sleep, it's like, okay, what are one or two things I can slowly change over time and not have to just redo everything? It's like incremental improvements.
Yeah. So you worked for Core Power Yoga and Equinox.
Yes.
What did you learn from these big companies and athletic companies in general that you can apply to creating content?
That's a good question. I think so. When I was I think the biggest piece was I was a group fitness instructor. I did other things as well, but that aspect of being kind of like a performer, as well as creating an environment where people want to come and be motivated to work out, was extremely valuable. Because my job, like as a group fitness instructor, is like you need to entertain the people that are there so they want to come back and take them through this fitness journey. So I think I learned a lot about how can I apply that same thing in content creation. So when I'm creating a video on YouTube, it's like, how can I entertain the viewer while feeding them some information that they can learn from? So that's kind of what I took away from all that.
And who do you think does that the best on YouTube right now?
Johnny Harris.
Johnny Harris. I don't know if I'm familiar with him.
Oh, I'm obsessed.
Why are you so obsessed with Johnny Harris?
His storytelling. He's extremely good at visual storytelling and taking you through a journey of, like, he just published a video about bread. And, bread, who cares about bread? But I was so captivated by how he took me through this journey of explaining how bread started in Europe and how it's evolved in the US and how they're different and why one might be better than the other. And I was just entertained, but at the same time I learned and I took away so much from that now I look at bread differently.
Wow. What do you think he did specifically that got you so hooked?
I think part of it was the visual piece of like, I'm able to be visually stimulated while I'm watching the content because I love absorbing content visually. And then the second piece is just the journey that he takes you through. It's a true story of, there's the characters of how bread was created and the whole process of like what the US did to the whole bread economy in a way. And like, I felt attached to knowing how that journey ended. So I think he does that really well. He kind of he shows you what the problem is and you get hooked and you're like, I want to know what happens at the end.
Yeah, I'm curious what happened with bread in the USA.
And bread in the US is extremely processed. There's a lot of chemicals and it's really bad for you.
And most of it. He told you this in a 10-minute YouTube video, basically?
Exactly, yes.
Wow. That's interesting. I'm definitely going to check him out. I've never heard of him. Yeah. Who else should I be interested in, or who else is a really good storyteller that maybe other people don't know about?
Okay, I like this guy, Leon Hendrix.
Leon Hendrix is a beast. Shout out Leon Hendrix.
Yes.
He's the man.
So his storytelling is absolutely insane. I feel like his storytelling is good, but I think the factor that makes him so different is his pace of growth.
He went from 0 to 300,000 in like a year, right?
Yeah. I met him when he had like 1,000 subscribers.
You're early on everyone.
Yeah, I'm in one of his early videos.
Wow. I didn't
he helped me quit my job. So credit to Leon for that.
How did he do that?
He inspired me. He was just like, his video was asking or helping strangers quit their job. And he kind of like helped me talk through what the basic requirements were for me wanting to quit and why I was scared to do it. And I was like, I need to hit X financial marker. And he's like, do you really need to hit that? And he helped me lower the bar in terms of what I needed financially to kind of get there.
And why do you love his videos so much?
I think one is just every video just gets better, so much better each time. It leaps forward. And then it's the storytelling pieces. Like he creates this world and these characters where you feel connected to them and especially him and wanting to see what happens at the end of this experience.
Yeah, he has one great video about the billboard and he puts himself on a billboard and gets a date and goes crazy. I love how I'll throw that in the show notes as well. It's just an incredible video.
Right. And everyone wants to find, maybe not everyone, but most people want to find like a life partner. So it's like you have that connection of like, oh, I want to see what his experience and journey was going through that. And, he does a great job of connecting with the viewer.
How do you balance the quality versus quantity debate? The consistency. I've heard you talk in podcasts about how you're consistent. But then I saw like you didn't post for the past 2 weeks, which is cool. Like, because there are ebbs and flows with all this stuff. How are you thinking about this today of your posting schedule, getting better as a YouTuber and growth in general?
Yes. Everyone has their own advice, and it's hard to be like, which one do I listen to? But there are people who say, post weekly and improve 1%. Then there's people who say it's all about the content, focus on creating great content. Doesn't matter when you post it. And I think, so I know I was going through some stuff, and I also took a break. I was like, I want to optimize and create great content consistently. So I kind of took a step back, and I was like, let me make a 3-month plan of what my next 12 videos are and make sure that the ideas seem interesting enough for people to want to click on and validate that with as many creator friends as I could. So that's kind of what the process I'm in right now. And then from there, I'm going to kind of batch create the next 12 videos in that way of validating each step, title, thumbnail, and then the hook, and then going from there. So that's how I'm kind of approaching the balance, is like, okay, maybe I do need to take a pause and rethink the overall strategy, and then publish for 90 days and then learn and see how did that content perform from there.
One thing I've heard you talk about is the importance of a group of people who are also doing the same thing. I'm curious, who's in your group of creators right now where you're texting them, asking them for advice, or just leaning on for guidance and growing with them?
Yes. I would say there's a lot of people. Some, I would say, like, there's my New York friends like Mike and Vince.
Mike who? Vince
Mike Hanna, and Vincent Chan. Both have YouTube channels and all in on YouTube. And the goal is to like grow and create great content. So like we have a group chat and we talk, and then I have like a separate YouTube group chat of people kind of like in my niche who also talk about wearables and things like that. And we bounce ideas off each other, and then always trying to connect with other creators. Jacqueline in New York City, nothing but tech. I've been hanging out with her a lot and really bouncing and brainstorming ideas. And Tejas, also another great guy that like I share my ideas with him and get his feedback. So I think it's really important to get other people's perspective, because when you're in it, you forget, like you miss things.
Totally. And who's, similar to the question about what are people going to be doing 5 years from now, who's a creator who people will know 5 years ago, 5 years from now, who today is relatively unknown?
Ooh, that's a great question. Who's a creator right now that people will know in 5 years who's kind of unknown?
Yes. And I trust your judgment on this because you're good. Yes Theory, Leon Hendrix, like you're incredible at spotting talent. And we'll get to that.
Maybe after. I should be doing that instead.
A&R for creators.
Just follow my investment advice.
Not investment.
Not investment.
Not advice. Creator advice.
Not creator. That's a great. Honestly, I think like Leon's doing an amazing job, and he's really early. Like, there's so much more. A lot of people still don't know who he is. Like,
true.
He's at 300,000-400,000 subscriber range. Like, he's gonna be a lot bigger. Like, if you can invest now, I would buy whatever his stock is.
Why isn't that a thing? Like investing in creators in that way. I think there's some mental health concerns that could come about, but we buy companies, so why can't we also buy early on people? I think NFTs are a way to somewhat do that in the future.
Yes. I think it's hard. People have tried to do like, different like tokens and things like that. It's not really worked out because people have to be all in. I think it's hard to be like, invest in me, because what if I die or if something happens to me and I can't keep doing the work? Like,
it's true.
It's hard. That's why it's easier to invest in the business that they create. But I feel like there should be something like that. And the way I see it is invest in those relationships. If I understand that like, oh, I see like they are going to do big things and I also have the goal of wanting to do big things, how can I like invest in the relationship so that way like we can all do big things together?
That's a good way to be.
Yeah.
And so what makes you so good at spotting talent?
I don't know. That's a great question. It's just I don't know. For some reason, it's a feeling. Like I can see it, and I Yeah. It's just like, I can see it and I'm like, I see something there and it intrigues me. And I have this gut feeling of like, that's going to be big.
What are there any examples of the opposite of having that feeling and the creator not working out?
That's the thing is, I probably forgot those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I have that bias of
survivorship.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yes. Not that I can remember.
Yeah. I mean, and let's talk about that feeling, because I think that feeling is so important in life and so important in discovering new things and people. And like, how do you hone that feeling of like, oh, wow, this person's going to be big, or this thing is going to be big?
Mm-hmm.
What is that voice? What is that feeling?
I think it's just trying, like, whether it's watching the content, trying the product, or buying whatever it is, and then just having that sensation of like, this is so exceptional.
Yeah.
And I will have the desire to tell all my friends and they think I'm an idiot. And that's usually when I realize, okay, I see value in this and they don't. So there's potential that like in the future, something might happen. And I think it's just that it comes down to the desire to want to try new things, and then experiencing that, and then realizing that, wow, this brings a lot of value to my life. Whether it is content or a product or experience, and feeling like I need to share that with everybody, and everyone else being like, I don't get it.
The opportunity is the knowledge gap.
Mm-hmm.
It's like true in stocks. It's true in people. It's true in creators. If you know something that the rest of the world doesn't know yet, that's an opportunity.
Yes.
And the fact that you're able to spread yourself so widely and consume so much content and figure out what is really hits you in that way allows you to have opportunity to form connections, to be there when other people aren't. And so it's really a superpower, man.
Thank you. I guess, I don't know. I never really thought about it that way, to be honest.
Yeah. But it is. And it's so interesting seeing somebody who is able to tell early on where talent lies. Were there any examples of that in your childhood?
Well, I'm trying to think, like in school, or I guess maybe like when I was in college, I remember I was trying to run for president, and I knew the person I was running against, like he was extremely talented, and I was like, he's gonna probably beat me because I just know that he's just very smart and intelligent about how he does things. And I don't know if that mindset made me lose, but he won, you know?
Self-fulfilling
and
prophecy.
I knew that he was very smart, like very strategic about how he does things. And he's been extremely successful in life after school as well. And, you know, we stay in touch and talk and close friends, but I could sense that like he just knew what he was doing. Like he felt confident in what he was doing, and he really dove into his strengths.
It's fascinating that looking at people that way. Well, one other thing, kind of switching gears here, you did was you lived with a dumb phone for 7 days. Take me through that experience. How did you decide that you're going to pick up a dumb phone instead of a smartphone?
Yes. So I think that's my addiction to my phone. I don't know. I know most people have an addiction to their phone. A lot of people, you know, are crazy and don't have an addiction to their phone. But I struggle with just wanting to pull out my phone and mindlessly scroll, or even just like going on the homepage and swiping left to right, looking for interesting things to pop up. And I'm trying to find a solution. I'm consistently testing different things until I figure it out. I haven't fully figured out what works, but part of the goal is sharing that journey on my YouTube channel of like, all right, I'm trying this. Let's see how it works. And so it was an iPod Touch, which is a little bit cheating, but it provided me the basic needs of operating in the world, right? Because you can't really live without a phone in this world. Even just going to a restaurant, like you have to scan a QR code. So you need something with a camera and internet access, or you have to have a friend who can do that for you. And it's just this, I want to be able to feel happy and still be connected to the world. Like social media is not bad. Phone usage is not bad, but everything in moderation. And I'm leaning more on the excessive use end. So I'm trying to find ways to minimize that usage and make sure that it's like appropriate. Yeah.
And so what did you find from doing that? Did you do it for 7 days?
It was like 24 hours.
24 hours. So
yes.
What did you learn from having a dumb phone for 24 hours?
I learned that when you have that habit of like, oh, I'll pull out my phone and scroll when you're on the subway, when you're in the elevator, whenever you're bored, you just pull out your phone and do things without thinking about it. And when you don't have the option to do that, you're like, being bored is extremely powerful. Boredom can lead to a lot of great things. So just practicing more boredom. And I learned that habits are very hard to break. Like my mind kept like wanting to do the things and I couldn't do them. And at the same time, it was valuable. Like I felt more focused throughout the day. I felt like I could do things and not have to pull out my phone and just do things that were not really beneficial to my life.
And what do you think we can do to not live with, if we don't want to live with the dumb phone, what little hacks or tricks or what can we do to make our lives with the smartphone a little bit easier and less addictive?
Just subscribe to my channel. That's a great question. I think it's because social media offers great things. Like I'm able to connect with other creators. I'm able to see like, oh, there's this event going on and I discover things because of that. So it's about creating like a time limit and finding ways to physically separate yourself. So one thing I'm doing now is I have 2 phones.
I got 2.
Yeah. And I have a social media phone and I that one doesn't have internet access. I leave it at home. And just creating that physical separation has been extremely powerful. And then another method I tried was I set up a shortcut on my phone where every time I'd open a social media app, it would jump to my notes app. And then I could write down what I needed to do and I could do it later. Wow.
How do you do that? How do you do that shortcut?
Yeah, there's an app called Shortcuts that's built into the iPhone, and you just open it, and then inside you can set an automation, and you'll say every time I open XYZ apps, and you can pick the apps you want, then open another app. So you could say when I open TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, open my notes app. You can say open this specific note.
Wow.
And then it'll do that. And then if you go back to Instagram, it'll go back to the notes app. So you can't really use it unless you turn that shortcut off.
Wow. So that just blocks it basically.
In a way, yes.
Interesting.
And then like, let's say I need to connect with someone and like add them on social media or message them, then I'll go turn the shortcut off, go and then message them and then turn the shortcut back on. So it creates a friction point.
Makes it more intentional.
Exactly.
Well. Interesting. I've never heard or thought to do that.
Yes.
I'm thinking about it.
Shortcuts is an amazing, like you can create automations around anything.
Are there any other powerful shortcuts you use on your phone other than the social media one?
There's ones where like if you arrive at home, you can have the lights turn on. I have one that reminds me about the sunset. So I'm trying to watch the sunset more often. So I will turn it on and say, okay, 45 minutes before the sunset, notify me and show me the weather app and play a song. So you can do things like that.
Dude, you're living in the future. That's so cool. Another video you had that I want to talk to you about is your advice to yourself in your 20s. And I think that's something a lot of people think about and regrets and stuff like that. And you were very open and you were vulnerable and you were just sharing your truths of what you felt like you could have done better in your 20s. Yeah. What do you think you could have done better in your 20s?
There's nothing that I don't regret because I wouldn't be who I am today without it. But I think just learning more. I think it's very hard to, it's very hard to say I would have done things differently. But I do wish that I had learned a little bit faster. I think I got stuck in certain kind of like negative feedback loops and like lost hope in some instances. So really putting myself, I think the most powerful thing I could have done is put myself in environments that were conducive to like the positive behaviors I wanted in my life, rather than putting myself in places that would push me in a negative direction. Yeah.
What were some of the loops that you got caught in?
I think in college, just, you know, people want to have kind of fun in college and not focus on school and experiment in different ways. And I think that's kind of what I got into too much. And I started to do things that like probably weren't conducive to like long-term greatness. And just like distracting myself with like in the moment pleasure rather than long-term joy. Kind of running away from my problems.
And what do you think switched the flip? Flip the switch.
Flip the switch.
Yeah.
I think I said switch the flip earlier too. When I graduate, I think graduating from college and living on my own, having a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 job working that, and then still continuing some of the behaviors that I didn't want to do. And then realizing, because my entire life I thought, okay, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, and like, that's it.
Follow the path.
And I did it. And I was like, okay, I'm 22. Now what?
Yeah.
I don't feel happy. I don't feel joy. Like, this is not what I want to do. I did what people told me to do. And I think I came to this realization that like, I need to change something if I want to be happy and feel fulfilled. So I decided to take that route and explore.
How do you take that route when other people around you don't necessarily understand, and you respect their input and you respect where they're coming from, but they're living in a world that's not your world?
Yes.
How do you navigate through that?
Move, change cities, like physical separation. Because like, I remember I lived in Santa Barbara and I was still around the same friends that I went to school with. And like, it's very easy to just continue the same habits that you have. And there's a great story in Atomic Habits about how the soldiers in Vietnam got addicted to heroin. And when they came back to the US, like most of them were no longer addicted because of the environment change. So I think if you're strategic about it and you can change your environment and by moving to a new city or moving a physical distance away, and then being smart in terms of like, these are the habits I want to implement and these are the habits I want to stop doing. And then when you do move to that city, working on making sure that those new behaviors become your actions and creating that consistency.
What was at the top of your list for those habits to remove and the most important habits to build in for your own personal life?
The biggest thing was just like not going out with friends. Like, yes, socializing is good, but not just like, you know, we're going to go to the bar, the club, like things like that, and focusing on building things that were exciting. And maybe that meant going to events where people were also building things so you could exchange ideas. So that was the biggest change for me. I was like, all right, I'm going to focus on not going and having these like going to a concert, right? It's okay to have fun, but not consistently doing that. And then focusing on building things that were exciting and kind of elevated me internally.
And you're sober, right? You don't drink alcohol? Or
I
you
do sometimes, yeah.
Were you sober at one point?
I did do a year of no drinking.
A year of no drinking?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was great. When I lived in San Francisco, I was like probably a year into my yoga journey, and I was like, I just felt like, you know, it was a waste of money. I would get hungover all the time. It just didn't feel good in any way. And I was like, why am I doing this? It's just to feel accepted, and like it made it easier to socialize. And I was like, okay, how can I teach myself how to socialize without alcohol? That was one. And how can I not be hungover the next day? Because my productivity was decreasing. So I did a year, no drinking, and I loved it. And then at the same time, it was like, do I need to have this hard, strong rule where I'm not drinking at all? So like, I'll allow myself to have like 1-2 drinks here and there, but I know that my next day is going to be, you know, not as great, and seeing that data is helpful. So everything with intention.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I similarly did like, I think 18 months without alcohol, and just like having that as a baseline lets you know you don't need it to be in social situations and to talk to people, because I think growing up, we use it almost as a crutch and not realizing how painful it potentially could be.
Yes. And what's funny is I grew up really shy.
Really?
So in high school, like I had like 1 or 2 friends, but like I didn't really socialize a lot. And when I went to college, I was like, I want to be social. I want to learn how to make friends and build a community. And I used alcohol as like a way to do that. And then I was like, okay, well, why am I using this substance to make it easier? Why can't I do it without it? And that's kind of what led to that journey.
And what do you find how does one make friends without using alcohol?
The biggest thing I learned is you don't make friends, you are the friend. So like when I moved to New York City, I didn't know anybody. I knew a couple people here and there, like from college, but you know, I wanted to make new friends. So I was like, how do I be the friend? And that's inviting people to do things with you rather than like expecting people to invite you. I think you need to invite people to come spend time with you.
I think that's a really subtle, important point.
Yes.
Because you're also then doing activities that you naturally would have done anyway. You're not trying to please anybody. You're just trying to please yourself. And when you please yourself, other people notice and they get excited and want to join you on your mission.
People love energy. People love like people being excited.
Yeah. That's really the truth and the secret of life, I feel like.
100%.
Well, Shervin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know how an hour has flown by like it has, but I'm really grateful for you being here and really bullish on Shervin and excited about you and your future. So thank you for spending some time today with me here. Where should we send the people to let them know everything you're about?
Shervin Shares. That's I'm pretty much every platform, Shervin Shares. You can go find me. YouTube is like my go-to, so you can find me there, and everything else should be linked. But it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to host you.
Thank you.
Thank you.